Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back for those of you who have listened to some of our other podcasts. And for those of you who are new, thank you for joining us. We are in for a real treat today. We have a friend, but also a very successful entrepreneur. Kathy Myron is with us today. She is the president and CEO of eSilo. And to be honest and fully transparent, I've known Kathy for a long time. We worked together at GE Capital. She was a dynamo and very dynamic at that point in time. And from what I know, she hasn't changed a bit. So I am excited to have her join us today and talk about cybersecurity and some other stuff. So welcome, Kathy, and tell us a little bit about eSilo. What is it? What do you do? And why in the heck did you decide on this?
Sure. Thanks, Dan, for having me. And it's so great to see you after so many years. For perspective, eSilo is a data backup and cybersecurity company. We primarily help small to mid-sized organizations, as well as some municipalities, protect and prevent situations like ransomware, recover after disasters, and other types of situations that they will often get themselves into because they don't have any dedicated cybersecurity staff or expertise. The simple way that I describe it is we protect against the 3 Ds, so disasters, downtime, data loss. The company's been around for almost 20 years. I actually acquired it and took over in 2018. So it is my organization. We've been building on it. In the beginning, it was purely an offsite data backup company. So this was way before cloud and many of the other terms that people would use today. So law firms, accounting firms, they didn't have the resources or the knowledge to set up an offsite disaster recovery facility. So they have been coming to us. We would do that for them from installation to restoration. So really everything that they need to know in concert with or to complement whomever their IT team or maybe outsourced company might be. So that's how the company got started. When I joined in 2018, one of the biggest opportunities that I saw was the situations that we were recovering from for our clients were really often preventable. So when you think about, you and I came from a Fortune 500 company, policies, procedures, training, governance, risk management, all of the things that are commonplace in a larger organization, the smaller businesses don't have. You know, they were outsourcing all of their security to, third parties. And a lot of them, you would sit and talk to them and they said, oh, well, if I have antivirus running, if I have a good password, that must be all I need. So we've done a lot of work around educating on what are some of the common risks, especially the ones that small businesses face. And then we perform assessments to help them understand where their gaps are, and then provide strategic guidance and action plans for them to be able to close those gaps.
Excellent, excellent. I knew that you did some of that, but not all of that. So we'll talk a little bit about the cybersecurity assessment in a minute, but I wanted to focus a little on data backup. Now, I've never really been a proponent of taking time to back up my data. I've always liked the computer to automatically do that for me. I imagine a lot of entrepreneurs are so busy that they don't think about doing that. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure why that is as important as you make it sound like it is. So could you explain to our listeners, why is it such an important aspect of data protection to back up the information that we utilize?
So you and I are familiar with the 3 lines of defense model.
Yep.
And I always say that your very first line of defense in an incident is to have a good set of backup. So at a minimum, no matter what happens, whether it's a cyber attack, it's an accident, it's a lightning strike, you always have a means by which to recover your systems and your data. Right? So cybersecurity is always a combination of prevention and recovery. This is the first thing that you do from a recovery perspective. There's plenty of things, especially the security companies or vendors will say, oh, buy this tool or implement these 25 things to prevent or avoid a cyber attack. The reality is that especially in small businesses, but even in large enterprises, it's impossible to be 100% guaranteed safe against a ransomware attack or any kind of malware. So you have to assume that bad guys are going to get in, they're going to do some damage. The backups are going to be that thing that you rely upon to get back on your feet. So that's why it's so important. I will tell you that we have had so many clients who have backups that either they manage themselves with their internal team, or they have the third-party MSPs managing their servers and their computers and workstations. And they have a set of backups. They get hit with ransomware. They come in one morning and all of their data is scrambled. They're locked out of their machines. Sometimes they're getting these blaring warnings coming out of the computer speakers, and they go to restore the backup, and for one reason or another, it's corrupted and cannot be restored. And so that thing that people assumed the computer was automatically doing for them isn't in fact there, or if it's there, it's unreadable. And there was a recent study done, I want to say it was 2020, 2021, by Veeam, and they said that 58% of attempted recoveries from a set of backups fail, either because of an issue with the backup itself or a mishandling of the procedures during the recovery. So the reason why we also recommend that even if you think you have backups, have an independent party, an independent vendor also manage them for you, or have an additional set, is because you never want to be in a situation where you only have one parachute, right? And that parachute is broken or faulty. And if you have an IT team that's responsible for your systems and something goes wrong, it's very likely that bad actor or that incident will have also corrupted your backups. I mean, think about it. It's the first thing to target when you're going after a company, is if you're going to install ransomware, as a part of that, the payload is to go after and corrupt and wipe out the backups. When you have a separate copy, you have different authentication mechanisms, different storage, different platforms, different team managing it. And so all of that diversity helps ensure that the likelihood of any single event or single actor being able to identify and access and corrupt those offsite backups is much, much, much less.
Excellent. Does it matter, Kathy, where you back up? And by that, I mean, do you back up to the cloud? Do you back up to a server? Does it matter really where the backup occurs?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be all in one specific place. And in fact, we recommend that you store backups in multiple places. So anyone in the industry will have heard of the golden rule 3-2-1, 3 copies of anything important stored on at least 2 different types of storage media, with at least one of those copies both off-site and off-network. And that just ensures that, again, any single incident would be highly unlikely to affect all of those copies in all of those locations. That air-gapped offline copy is so critically important. So if you're a very small business and you are not comfortable with the cloud for one reason or another, that could be a USB drive that you detach every night after you take the backup. I mean, it could be something very rudimentary, although we never usually recommend that because it's very manual. It relies on humans, right? What would be much more strong and recommended would be to have an independent party manage that for you with software, so that an additional copy is going off-site and off-network onto a separate network area, so not within your company's network, or not just to another site within your company where there is VPN connectivity, and that you're maintaining your copy over there. That's essentially what we do for our clients, is we store their data in our data centers as their off-site means for recovery.
Interesting. So let me ask you this then. If I was in a small community bank or a credit union and I wanted to make sure I did the right backup, what are 2 or 3 things that I would look for in a company that would offer me that backup services, that would make me be comfortable that it's the right place to be?
Yes, automated. You want all of the scheduling of the jobs, the retention, all of that to be 100% automated. You don't ever want to have to interact with it. Although I will say that monitoring of these solutions is incredibly important, right? But the solution itself works totally automated. Second is encryption. You want to make sure that if you're working with a vendor, of course, the backups are encrypted before they ever leave the host machine, right? The source machine. And preferably they're going to be stored in a way where the service provider, the one managing it for you, doesn't have access to open up your backups and see what's inside. So we have a mechanism where we allow clients to have a per backup encryption password that they and only they know, so that you ensure you have zero knowledge. Then the third piece would be intelligence. Backups involve transferring of a lot of data from point A to point B. They can affect network bandwidth performance. So your users might notice that things are slow. You also don't want to transfer or pay to store more data than is necessary, only the bits and bytes that have changed or that are new. So you want to ensure that the software you're using is modern, it's intelligent, it has a lot of this logic built into it. So again, it's as hands-off as possible. And then the last piece I would say is you want to look at the reputation of the company that you're evaluating. Are they reputable? Do they have a long history and a long track record of performance? Last thing you want to do is put all your eggs in a basket with a vendor who's maybe a little bit newer or unproven, and then a year, 2 years from now, they're bankrupt and they're no longer, and you don't even realize it. And then, there goes your backup plan, and you only discover it when you need it. So. Okay,
good advice. I really like that. I learned a lot in just those few seconds. I learned an awful lot. That's very helpful. Thank you. Let's switch a little bit from backups to something else that I saw on your website that I think is pretty cool. And I'm not a cybersecurity expert by any way, shape, or form. You probably remember I used to have a flip phone instead of an iPhone. I now do have an iPhone. Okay.
I now have a flip phone.
Oh, and you're the smart one in technology. I'm not, so I've got to upgrade to a flip. Let's talk about the cybersecurity assessment. You talked about it in your intro. You've got it on your website. What is it, and why is that important for, say, a company like our clients? And then how often do we need to do something like that?
Yeah. So you've put a lot in there, so I'll try to unpack it piece by piece.
Sure, absolutely.
Why is it important? It essentially, you need to do an assessment. You need to look around, kick the tires, to understand whether or not you have vulnerabilities and gaps in your environment. It's great to have policies and procedures. It's great that you don't think you've ever experienced a cyber attack or any kind of intrusion, but how do you know for certain that you've checked everywhere and in a holistic way? So that's ultimately the goal of the assessment. Usually, organizations, especially small to mid-sized organizations, undertake an assessment for a couple of triggering reasons. One might be that they recognize their risk and they want to have cyber liability insurance, but when they receive the 25-page application form, they either don't understand it or they realize that there's a number of things that form asks about that they don't currently do. And so they know that until they do those things, they implement those protection measures, they're either not going to get coverage or they're going to pay through the nose, even more so than they would have ordinarily. So that's one. Second kind of triggering event for an assessment is either an actual attack or a near miss. So those are, very obvious. We want to understand how or why someone could have gotten into the environment, how things could have gone wrong, and then, go ahead and do a remediation afterwards. And then the third is often with organizations as they begin to grow and scale, as they start to market to more savvy clients, or if they're in a regulated industry, they're going to have to do this anyways. They recognize that the bar is being raised and that they're going to have and be the subject of an audit or an examination of their internal controls. And so this is a great way for them to do a readiness assessment. And I'll give you a perfect example. I talked to a company, they're in the legal space last week, and they would like to work with insurance companies, but in order to have them as a partner, they need to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. So they have to have passed a SOC 2 exam, but that's a very expensive undertaking that can easily be in the range of $60,000 to $100,000 for the external auditors to come in, and all of that. So they are talking to us to help prepare them for, well, what are the things that we need to button up? How do we put in place the right policies and procedures and controls, so that when the audit occurs, we are very likely to pass. So those are just a couple of the things I think that tend to drive small to mid-sized organizations to undertake these assessments. I think that the other thing that's important to know is that the leaders of these organizations, whether it's the board, the C-suite, the ownership, if something goes wrong and they experience a data breach or a compromise, right, they're the ones who are ultimately on the hook. So think about getting sued, think about going to jail. You want to be able to demonstrate that you have taken appropriate measures to understand your cyber risk, address the gaps. And even if you hadn't had an opportunity to close all of those gaps, if you have a project plan and you can have demonstrable progress towards implementation, then I think you have a much more defensible position than saying, well, we bought a couple of tools, we turned them on, but we never actually undertook a complete assessment to test how well we were doing in adhering to those controls.
Excellent, excellent, good advice. Let me ask you something off the wall here, because I want your opinion on this. A few years back, I kind of had a personal epiphany. And the epiphany was that regardless of where you work, you're going to have a cyber intrusion. And you can work as hard as you want to kind of prevent it, but you're not going to prevent it all the time. So it's extremely important to be able to recognize and react to those situations. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective of that. Is that a fair assessment, or is my epiphany not epiph enough, or I don't know.
No, you're spot on. You have to plan for when, not if. And okay. So it kind of goes along with what I was saying before about like backups are one of the things that you plan for when it happens. Another thing would be your incident detection capabilities, and then your plan to respond. So I'm a big governance and kind of risk management planner. And that's a lot of that just has to do with my audit background. And so I think having a good business resiliency plan, a good disaster recovery plan, a good incident response plan means that when something bad happens, no matter what caused it, your organization has a plan to work off of, because you have to assume that key people who have that knowledge might be unavailable, that your method or your mechanisms for communicating with one another might be compromised. And if you haven't already established protocols for what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and by the way, keeping an offline copy of these plans, because assuming you can't get into your computers, right? How are you going to go pull up the plan? How do you know who to contact and what their personal cell phone is? I think that piece is so important. So kind of around your epiphany of, well, it's going to happen. So if you believe that it's going to happen, and yet you don't take the opportunity to plan for it in advance and give yourself the best chances of a more positive outcome and a faster return to normal operations, then I think you're doing yourself and your shareholders and your ownership a disservice, and your clients.
Excellent, excellent. Let's talk about something that we're going to kind of jump around a little bit, because there's so many things that I think people like to know about, and either they like to reconfirm or confirm their belief, or maybe learn something new. Your thoughts on data retention and data destruction. Something when we were in audit together, obviously we would audit for that, and they'd have to have a policy, they'd have to follow their guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts now that you've been out in the real world for a few years and not the audit world per se? What are your thoughts about those two simple little things, data retention and data destruction?
I think that as an industry, we collectively don't talk about it enough and don't focus on it as much. And I see it especially with the organizations I work with. They don't know where all their data resides. They don't know how important it is. I mean, they know conceptually, but they can't easily identify that more sensitive data residing in different systems. And as a result, they hoard and hold on to everything, and they apply the same level of controls around everything, which might be fine, but it also starts to get a little expensive. And so I'm a big believer in having a clear data retention policy. I would say you need to have your attorney assist you in writing that, so they're considering your legal obligations for retention, and then you can have your IT person work with you on approved destruction mechanisms, right? How do you destroy and or retain, right? Save the
Yep.
paper, the digital copies, things like that. But I don't think we talk about it enough, and it is going to be an increasing problem because we are creating and storing exponentially more data every day.
Yep. Wow, I could probably have you on all day long and talk about this stuff. You should do your own podcast, Kathy. You should just actually have it as part of something you do and just do it because you do great.
I've been asked to do that, and I was like, I just like showing up to someone else's because then I don't have to do all the work.
Hey, I'll be your agent, okay?
I'm happy to come back.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I will be your agent. I will make sure you get enough, and it's only 20% for me. As a final, just a couple words, anything that you would say if you were walking out the door and you would just talk to us, what's the last thought you'd leave with us with regard to the importance and the value that what we've talked about today really has for us?
Yeah, I would say, and I love what you guys do with this podcast because I think you echo a very similar message, which is that cybersecurity, privacy, risk management, these are board and C-suite level topics. These are the things that at the highest levels of leadership in the organization, you need to be focused on. It is very easy to delegate that to the IT team or the CIO or whomever. But the reality is that someone who's more on the ground of the organization sees what's happening day to day, but they can't be the ones defining the risk tolerance. They can't be the ones prioritizing some of the bigger initiatives and projects that are necessary to implement, really modern and strong controls. And so if you're not already having those conversations in your leadership meetings or at your board meetings, I would really encourage you to. And I think one of the reasons why those conversations don't always happen at the level that they should is this discomfort with cybersecurity is very nebulous and
Yeah.
maybe it's a little it feels uncertain. I'm not sure am I talking about it right? Am I asking the right questions? And I would say if you ever feel uncomfortable, go find yourself a great advisor who could be on the sidelines to help demystify some of this, because these are conversations that need to be had.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much, Kathy. Love having you. I may invite you back. There's so much more to talk about. I want people to get in touch with you. So kathymyron.com, meetkathy.com, esilo.com.
Yes.
That's excellent.
Yes, that is the best way. This one gets you on my calendar. This one is my LinkedIn, and then you can always go to the website just to learn a little bit more about us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll have you back.